What is going on, everyone, and welcome to Dynasty Dumbies, your home for the latest and greatest in college football news and action. We're your hosts, Tony and Hunter, and we're going to jump right into the main story of all stories, of course, the national championship, where Indiana completes their historic season over Miami 27-21 in an amazing national championship game. If you missed it because there was no SEC team in it, you missed out on an all-time classic. This was one of the greatest playoff football games we have seen in quite a long time.
This was a really good way to cap off a really exciting season. This game it had it all, and congrats to both teams here. Miami, got to give them their flowers. They played really well and were right in it right till the very end. They came through on a Cinderella run of their own, in a sense of being the 10 seed this year, making the national title game when people thought that they shouldn't have made it at all into the playoff. So congrats to them. A fabulous season, a year that they should be proud of and that they're going to continue to build off of. But Indiana, I mean, what a game, what a season on their part. And it was just fun to watch it all culminate in this championship win, and it just felt like a fun team and fun story to ride along with over the last 2 years.
Very much so. I mean, this Indiana team felt like a team of destiny in sorts, where everything was going against them, the media and everything, but their play on the field was doing extremely well, and they were way ahead of schedule. And to get it done in year two under Signetti is just a great story and one of the greatest in sports. I don't care what anyone else says. It's one of the fantastic ones. But this game was almost a tale of two halves with how the game flow was sort of going, where in the first half it looked like, a possible blowout with the way that Indiana was playing. Their defense was dominating in that first half. Where they had just they were forcing so many 3-and-outs for Miami. It felt like Miami had no rhythm whatsoever in the game. Held them to 69 yards at the half, which is just insane to think about. But you got to give credit where it's due. I mean, they came prepared in that first half, and they absolutely looked like they were going to run away with it.
Indiana's defense has been like this all year. They were suffocating in that first half. But credit to Miami's defense, because they were playing really well despite how it felt like it was going. Miami wasn't completely out of it, down 10-0. The defense was keeping them in it, even though their offense couldn't get anything going. They really were beating up on Mendoza the entire game, and especially in that first half, where they just did not let him get away with a clean pocket, a clean run. Any chance they got, they were going to hit him. And that havoc kept them close enough in it, despite being that 10-0 deficit at half.
Absolutely, and I don't think Mendoza has felt anything like that the entire season, where it seemed like throughout most of the season he always had the amount of time he needed, or if he needed to scramble, it wasn't in too bad of a hurry. But credit to the Miami defense, of course, Ruben Bain, Akeem Mesidor causing havoc like always. Those guys have a bright future ahead of them in the NFL. And they should absolutely hold their heads high because they did fantastic. Yes. And then going into that, or finishing out the first half there, Miami has the ball. They're trying to drive, get some points on the board. They missed that field goal, which was pretty crucial in the long run. And then they come out in that second half and get almost a dream start, where Indiana comes out with the ball in the second half, and obviously the only thing Miami is thinking is get a stop. Because they absolutely needed it, because falling down 17-0 and to start the second half would have probably made the game done and dusted. But they get the stop, they force the punt, which eventually sets up a huge Mark Fletcher run, who had a fantastic game and just completely changed the momentum of the game, where it felt like Miami sort of got that momentum back that they needed and finally got some things going that they could not get going in the first half.
I mean, as soon as he broke that run, it was that feeling of, now we're watching our game. Now the real show begins. It was the perfect start to the second half for Miami. And it stayed 10-7 for a while, and just when it looks like, it's going to turn into this slow, drawn-out fight where, whoever has that last possession gets the win, game-changing block by Indiana, who comes in nearly untouched, blocks the punt, recovers it in the end zone, touchdown, make it 17-7, and it was just really poor punt protection. The protector up front just did not put his body in between the defender and the punter and let him run right at him, and that completely opened the game wide open to end that third quarter, beginning of fourth quarter, and that's where the floodgates open, and this game just felt like it was a back-and-forth gunslinging fight for that last 15 minutes.
Yeah, I think that absolutely changed just about every aspect of that game where, obviously Miami, again, having to punt the ball kind of deep in their own zone, obviously, with the punt being blocked, landed right in their end zone, so it was touchdown or bust for Indiana there. But I think what that says is just basically the special teams, I think, is what ended up hurting Miami the most. Obviously missing that field goal at the end of the half. That would have gave them that momentum that they sort of needed, at least had points, because then they scored that touchdown in the second half. It's a tie game instead, but then that punt gets blocked, completely changes everything, and it almost seemed like, they had such a big hole to dig themselves out of that they almost put themselves in to begin with. So it was going to take quite a bit to get out of that hole, and you can't say they didn't have a chance, because they absolutely did. At the end of the game, down 6, and they get the ball back and they have a chance to drive and go.
We said it a lot last week, was that Miami had to play a perfect game. They couldn't make mistakes, and unfortunately, they just made one too many. The missed field goal, the block punt, those miscues did cost them. But it was not, like you said, with a lack of effort. They played their guts out. They left it all out on the field. Malachi Toney had a phenomenal game. 10 catches, 122 yards, and a touchdown, getting them going in that second half. But the real story was Mendoza's real Heisman moment. This was the moment he finally, I thought, had that extremely iconic play, more than the catch and throw at Penn State earlier this year for the comeback there. That run on 4th and 5 was one of those plays that is going to be talked about for a long time. It was just an incredible play call, incredible run, and a whole lot of guts by Mendoza to be able to find the end zone, not only get the first down, but score, take a hit, roll off of it, full body extension. Watching it live, you could do nothing but stand up out of your seat. It was that exciting.
It's even funnier, after the game, he's explaining that play specifically where, he was told that, if I'm saying it right, I believe that if it was man coverage, he was supposed to throw the ball because, they're very RPO heavy. They love their RPOs. And if it was zone coverage, he was going to run the ball. It was designed for him to run. And then he said, well, half the field was in man, half the field was in zone. And he basically said, screw it, I'm pulling this thing myself, and just decided to take off. And sure enough, that gave him his just iconic crowning moment of, like, that play will be played for years on years.
Indiana fans will never forget that.
Absolutely. Putting his body on the line like he has done basically all season, where he will take or do whatever it takes to get it done, get over that goal line, get over the finish line, and it sure as hell helped them quite a bit, because that, I think that touchdown almost, I don't want to say it put the nail in the coffin, because it didn't, but that was one of those where it's like, okay, the momentum was definitely swinging in Miami's favor, and if they walked away with anything other than a touchdown, that game would have been probably a lot closer and could have potentially fell the other way. But I mean, just absolutely fantastic from him. I loved his parents' reaction to it. It's fantastic. I know his mom saying, like, I got to remind him he's a quarterback. He's supposed to throw the ball, not run it. So it's so funny. It's just a great thing overall. And just that crowning moment there at the end for them, where it's like, this is the dude that took him over the finish line, and much deserved for them.
Unfortunately for Miami, that 4th and 5 play kind of summed up their night. As well as their defense played, it just felt like when they needed that most crucial stop, they couldn't get it. In the first half, they were 4 of 7 on third down, Indiana was. They ended up going 6 of 16, so Miami really stepped it up in the second half, but Indiana did have 2 fourth down conversions, and it just felt like when Indiana needed a big play, whether it was Surratt in the passing game or a big run, they were able to get it, and Miami's offense just didn't play well enough in the first half to overcome what they lacked, and it was a great game, and Miami deserves all the credit in the world. But this Indiana team is, in my opinion, the single best sporting turnaround in sports history, without a doubt, American sports history.
In American sports, I would 100% agree. Overall, I might have a slight disagree. I think there's one above them.
I think I know what you're going to say.
He probably is. And for me, being a huge soccer fan, I believe it is the Leicester City team as the best turnaround ever. But this is right there with me. I think you cannot downplay what Indiana has done as a program in 2 years. Absolutely insane to think they were the losingest program ever, and 2 years later, undefeated national champions. I mean, it doesn't get much sweeter than that. And to do it in 2 years is crazy. And, you can sit here and argue the day and age of college football and what things have done. It's easy. It's not. I mean, because we'll get into later this whole, they were a team. They weren't a bunch of superstars. Mm-hmm. They weren't a bunch of 5 stars. Their payroll isn't, $50 million. Mendoza's not getting paid, $5-6 million or however much that Carson Beck's getting paid to go out there and play. He's going out there to play because he loves the game, and the whole team did, and they all bought in. And the fact that they did this, and especially in today's day and age with how college football is going, just completely shattered the just myth of team building now, where you think you have to go out and pay these players as much money as they want so you have the quote-unquote best players. But if you can have the one good player, but if the 10 others aren't playing together, or that one player isn't playing with the 10 others, it's never going to work. And what we saw with this Indiana team was every time they took the field, they had 11 team players who were all on the same page and were all doing it together for the common goal of we want to win.
This team just was a collection of people with chips on their shoulder. They were the most disciplined team all year long. A great stat was that they only had one fumble the whole year, their first game against ODU. They did not lose another fumble the entire year. That, to me, that is discipline. That is hard work. They exuded that the whole year. They wanted to prove to everyone that, hey, just because you overlooked us doesn't mean we aren't good enough. And they ran the table, first FBS team to go 16-0. Good thing we care about real football more than soccer, because to me this is the greatest turnaround in sports history. The only college football story turnaround that I think comes close is Bill Snyder with Kansas State when he took over there, but he never won a title. I think Indiana will be successful for a long time, so this is the greatest turnaround for me. It's truly amazing to see, and no one thought this was going to happen. And if you're a fan of a program that is outside of those top 10, top 15 colleges that have, been at the top for so long, this is the best possible outcome that you could have wanted, because everything that we've been told for years has been proven wrong. You can win a national championship. It's not impossible. Like you said, Indiana, the losingest program in history until midway through this year, are now the undefeated national champions within 2 years.
It's unreal, absurd, to say the least, and just crazy to think, if you would have said this 5 years ago, nobody would have believed you. If you would have said this 10 years ago, people, would have been like, this dude's an idiot. If you said it 30 years ago, you might have gotten accused of being a witch or something, burned at the stake for saying something like this. So it's a great thing for, the people like us, where we're the G5 fans, the lesser schools in these quote-unquote P4s, where it's like, this is possible. It's very much possible, and you see what was done with this Indiana team in 2 years. It's like, okay, obviously that's a very high bar to set. I don't want to be the Debbie Downer, but most teams are not going to do it in 2 years. So no. Maybe,
there's going to be a lot of fan bases
don't think like that.
Expect too much now. However, and that's what makes this story so special, because it's possible, but to do it in 2 years is crazy. And to share how crazy of a turnaround this job with Indiana was, before Cignetti got there, the last time Indiana won more than 8 games was 1967. The man had not been put on the moon. The NFL and AFL hadn't merged. The NHL had 6 teams, and gas was $32 a cent. That's shared from Jaguar Gator 9 on Twitter. If you don't follow him, you should. Great follow. This turnaround is unheralded, and too many teams will fall into the trap of, well, we can do it in 2 years too. And there could be one that does, but it probably isn't going to happen for most in this speed.
And I think realistically, if it comes to it where a team does do it in this time or less, more than likely it's going to be in a time where, you know, their payroll is over like $100 million, where they literally have all the best possible players and, you know, 7 different Hall of Fame coach. Like, there was the only way to really top this would be basically to buy out the sport, and you could even say cheat somehow, because like the way that that Indiana has done it, it will probably never be replicated in the sense of the time frame. You know, it could be replicated, you know, any time from now on. You know, we're seeing coaches go from G5s to P4s, and it's very possible that these teams could absolutely replicate this. And I think this gives those coaches and those players that feeling of, we can do it. I mean, you know, you're looking at, you know, Bob Chesney going to UCLA and the players that are going with him, and John Sumrall going to Florida and the players that are going with him. Like, they now think, like, look what they just did. Why can't we do that? Like, we absolutely can now, because, you know, we see what they did. And, like, now that they're successful, Indiana, now that they are successful, they're getting that, like, influx of, like, you know, support from people like Mark Cuban and all these other things, where now they're getting it. They didn't have it before.
No,
when,
people
you know, last
like
year when
before.
they first started off with Cignetti, and then
People
this year
thought
when
it was
they
a
started.
fluke.
No, absolutely
Colin
nobody
Coward
thought
said that in a tweet last year. He said that the one thing that people could all agree on was that Indiana should never be welcomed back to a playoff. That was last year. Indiana got the final laugh on everyone that said that they were a fluke last year. They clearly were not. And this team's here to stay. But this 2025 Indiana team, how does it rank amongst these best of all time teams? The 2019 LSUs, the 2001 Miamis, 95 Nebraskas, 09 Bamas, those types of teams. Where do they fall in that kind of discussion? Because I think that they're going to go down as probably one of the most underrated champions ever, in my opinion. They're never going to get the true respect they deserve.
I'm with you there. I think in the long run, you know, you could even say, you could probably argue next year when people are talking about it, but I think in the long run, you know, years from now, I think they will end up being one of those most underappreciated and underrated champions of all time, because I think people are going to forget about what they accomplished in so little time and what they were able to do this season. And, you know, it's purely going to come from those SEC shills that are like, well, you know, they didn't have to go through the SEC gauntlet and, you know, do all this. But, yeah, they're going to find ways to discredit it per usual. But I definitely think this is up there with one of those best teams of all time. I think it's going to take quite a bit to top that 2019 LSU team. They statistically and number wise, they were just absurd. And albeit, again, they only had to play 2 games. So I think it's a little different
stats,
now.
Honestly, I was looking at some of the stats between the 2 teams, and they aren't as crazy separated as you'd think. It's actually Indiana has the edge in a lot more than you'd think. But I am with you. The best team that I have seen, I still think that 2019 LSU team is the best team of all time, followed by 01 Miami. I don't think this Indiana team beats one of those 2, but I think they're a lot closer to that number 3 spot than most people would consider. 16-0 deserves to be respected, and they really were that good all year long, and they should be in that easily the top 10 greatest teams of all time. Just for me, not one of the top spots there with LSU and Miami.
Yeah, my first initial thought when, you know, you had sent a text earlier when it was like, where does this team rank all time? My first initial thought was top 5, and I was like, and I think that's, you know, pretty I don't want to say generous, but I think that's like a kind of like sort of, because like you said, top three, you're kind of pushing a little there with that LSU team, that 0-1 Miami team. Like, I would agree with you, top two basically right there. You could interchange those two realistically, and nobody would really bat an eye. But they're definitely up there, and I think over time, maybe once this kind of settles and once we're kind of moving on to the other things, and then we go to look back on it, I think it could be like, wow, like they were this good, and it's not like they didn't play anybody. They went through some of the top teams. They played the so-called SEC powerhouse in Bama and ran the table on them and ran the table on their Big Ten rivals, and then had a fantastic game against a very good Miami team. And so it's going to be crazy to think about. More than likely, people are going to try to discredit it as much as possible, but I'm hoping in the long run that we will come to fully appreciate what we actually were able to see this year.
I think this team has just really turned around people's opinions on college football, where there just felt like a growing and growing divide between the people who want to see the sport grow in a direction that props up certain programs while tries to diminish others, where Indiana has brought people in of saying this is awesome to see a team like Indiana win, because no matter what age you talk about college football, anyone hearing Indiana win is like, wow, that's awesome that they did this. It's a great story. It is. This team has done more positive PR for college football than any other outcome could have done, in my opinion. Seeing a team that the losingest team of all time go on a 27-2 bender over the last 2 years and win the Natty and become one of the greatest teams of all time. This story will be a great movie one day.
It'll be fantastic, and I am really looking forward to eventually when it gets its proper recognition by, especially these SEC shills that are trying to find a way to discredit it. And I think the best part about all of this is how much they got basically a giant middle finger. And, we've talked about it all season, of course, me and you specifically, where we just constantly talk about how much they try to discredit any other team. As long as they don't have an SEC logo on their chest, it's any other team. They will do whatever they can to discredit it. And I think this year, and how the playoff went specifically and how things unfolded, it showcased a lot of faults and frauds in the SEC, especially the people who cover them and are their mouth breathers. And that's probably one of the bigger positives that's come out, is we're seeing how diverse the sport is as a whole, where it's not just one conference that can do this. I mean, the last three champions have been Big Ten teams.
Yep.
So it's like, you can't sit here and say that the SEC is super dominant when they haven't won anything, even been to the final in the last 3 years. So it's, we're seeing this sort of power shift in the diversity of college football open up, and I think that does nothing but grow the sport, where now you're not stuck with 10 teams maybe in one conference, and then maybe a few here, a few there, sort of thing. Where now we're seeing the wealth is being spread. Other teams are realizing that they can win as well and they can compete. And I think that just does nothing but grow the sport and just make it better as a whole.
I agree. And not to sidetrack us, that's the exact reason why I think all conference champions should make the playoff, because then you give every conference a payday at the end of the year. And that does nothing but help grow the game. And that's what it should be about. And Indiana has really helped with that growing of the game aspect. And Indiana shattered the blue chip myth of you have to be a team filled with blue chip prospects, when what you and I have been talking about all year is that does not matter.
It absolutely does not matter.
No, not at all. Coaching and culture and the X factor of what a team can do is what truly makes a team great. And when you have a coach like Nick Saban, the greatest to ever do it, before the national championship game, admitting that they would never look at how many stars a player had, because you have to consider who gives star ratings. Those media members, as he said, don't know their ass from a handful of sand. So if the greatest coach ever is saying that star rankings don't matter, maybe we should listen to him, because he's probably knows something or two about recruiting.
And, this is coming from someone that would get a lot of high stars, but then you see, some of the other players that would kind of make their way in where they weren't highly touted. I mean, he even said that Josh Jacobs was unranked when they were going to look at him. And then once Alabama had offered him, he became a 4-star recruit purely because that Crimson A had sent a letter to him saying, we want you to be on our team. So that just goes to show that the people that are handing out these star rankings are going to have the bias themselves, where we see it all the time where, any sort of transfers or now recruits where, they get an offer from these 3 schools and then a couple SEC schools, and then they get down to their last nitty gritty and like they pick that SEC school. They might go from that 3 to a 4. They might go from that 4 to that 5 purely because of the team that they're picking. So it props them up. And then that leads just into the whole preseason shit that we keep talking about, where, the preseason rankings are basically based on how many good recruits and how many star ratings you got from during the offseason and whatnot. When we've obviously seen that it means absolutely nothing.
To see the continued pushing of these rankings matter when these stars are given by people who aren't paying attention to the skills of the player, they're just paying attention to the news around it, shows that they should be taken with a grain of salt. Great players can come from any star level. And just because Indiana's talent composition featured 0 5-stars and only 7 4-stars doesn't mean they weren't filled with a roster of great teams. It goes to prove that any roster in the country can win a national championship game with the right guys if you set up the right culture and do it the right way. Cignetti said it himself that there might be 8 draft picks on their team. Probably not even. But their whole was greater than the sum of their parts, and that's what led to that national championship game.
I couldn't have said it better than Sig himself, where, like I had said earlier, you could have that 1 or 2 5-stars, but if they don't click with the other guys on the field or the other guys don't click with them, good luck. You're not going to get much. It's going to be hard to get any sort of cohesion. A well-oiled machine is only as good as one of the gears, but that gear is only as good as the other gears that are turning with it. So if one gear stops working, the other ones are going to stop working as well. And, seeing a team like this, the way that they had it done with their talent, their quote-unquote talent composition, where they had those 0 5-stars. I mean, when the playoffs started, I saw a graphic of, all the rosters' talent composition. Tulane had a better quote-unquote talent composition than Indiana. But you didn't see us in the national championship. No. And so it just goes to show it's how the team is built. And you're seeing, finally, maybe it's just, him blowing hot air, but Kirk Herbstreit saying like, oh, this is a team like that we're finally seeing, even though he's kind of a shill himself. But, they're starting to realize that it's about the team. It's not about the individuals. Maybe an individual props you up and helps you in that little bit, but the team as a whole is what is going to create this, well-oiled machine like that we saw in Indiana that can push you across the line when you need it to the most. And I think we're going to see a little more of that now, because now people see the formula of like, okay, I don't have to chase after all these 5-stars and waste my time doing this. I can probably go after the lesser guys and I can turn them into 5-stars with proper coaching, proper development.
Make them yes.
Development is huge in every sport. Yes. Development is huge in every sport. I don't care what sport it is. You can find that wonder kid or that 5-star recruit or whoever it is. But if you don't development, it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing, because skill and talent only takes you so far. You got to work for it. And Indiana has shown specifically that they worked for it. They earned it. And they finally capped it off by getting, the crown jewel of it all in the national championship.
It was a well-deserved victory, and I selfishly just got to give a shout-out to the JMU implants at Indiana. Those guys played a huge role in their success. If you didn't see the storylines and talking points, but Cignetti and those Indiana team members gave a lot of credit to the JMU guys for helping bring in that winning culture, and also gave a shout-out specifically to Mike Kadak, who was their starting center last year and was played all his years at Indiana and helped bring that locker room together and making it a winning environment, one locker room set with one goal. And seeing those JMU guys, Tucker, Fisher, Elijah Surratt, Kamara, D'Angelo Pons, being the guys to raise the national championship game trophy with Signetti was awesome, even though it had me punching air wishing that they were wearing the purple and gold of JMU.
It would have been the perfect story, but sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need that scenery change or whatever it is. But the fact that they got it done was just a great thing on its own.
Yeah,
to
makes you wonder how good was that 2023 JMU team really? Maybe the best ever. Some are saying. Just some people's thoughts though.
There's some people being the two JMU alumni in our group chat. So, that's
I have heard that they
say.
are really smart individuals. So,
we'll have to see about that. Maybe we'll do a dummy test. But that's why we're called the Dummies. But again, just this game capping off an amazing season that we've had, and the way it all fleshed out. Such a highly entertaining season, and it seems like it's only going to get better. Possibly, depending on changes and whatnot. But to switch gears here into some storylines coming up is, obviously we're going to hit the portal news per usual, with the biggest news coming with the portal is, of course, being Darian Mensah, the former Tulane and now Duke quarterback, is entering the portal. He entered basically last minute, and he is now getting sued by Duke for saying that he had allegedly signed a binding contract, an NIL deal that is required, that he's required to fulfill on Duke, and that is, just insane to see, because we saw it recently with Washington and their quarterback, where he tried to enter the portal, then they threatened to sue, and then he ended up coming back and just being like, sorry, nope, I'm going to stay here, fulfill it. So, we're going to have to see where this falls, but, this all comes in light of, him entering the portal out of nowhere, because the rumor is that he's going to Miami. Because, Miami was in heavy straits for a quarterback, because we all know that Carson Beck is gone, which seems like he's been here for 10 years. But he is now gone, probably going to go or enter the draft. And so they know they need a quarterback. And, what better way to find one in the portal, and then, the one that's in their conference that lit it up in his first year in the P4, and, let's just be like, hey, we got a lot of money, we can just kind of chuck it your way, sort of thing. And, the rumor of what was built into that contract for Miami is kind of crazy. Obviously don't know how much of it is true, but from what I saw is that it was a pretty insane deal, and I think anybody would be stupid to turn it down, obviously. But now we're going to see where this falls into, the legal aspect of it. Is, did he sign that contract? And if he did, what's the legal terminology of it to where he has to stay?
It's a complicated situation. I think if he signed a multi-year deal with him, you have to stay true to your word. You legally gave your word that you would stick through that contract. We saw it with Washington just a couple weeks ago. But Mensah is a really good talent, and I know Miami's going to want him, so they're going to try to get him out of it. We'll see how that one develops. But honestly, a news that was just really weird to see the day, less than 12 hours after winning the national championship game, was Alberto Mendoza, the younger Mendoza brother and backup to his Heisman-winning brother this year, entered the portal and immediately committed to Georgia Tech. That comes off the news of TCU quarterback Josh Hoover committing to Indiana in the portal. So not that surprised there. He gets to ride off into the sunset, and as a champion gets to go compete for a starting job at Georgia Tech. I think that makes sense with Hoover coming in. Go get your shot elsewhere. Kind of cash in on your last name while it's still really hot.
Absolutely. And it doesn't beat, getting to do what they just accomplished with your brother. I mean, you guys grew up together. They got to do it basically in their backyard, where they grew up in Miami, went to Miami Hurricane games in that same stadium.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just a great send-off and a great end to the story there for him. But now it's his time to, start his own chapter.
Own story.
He wants to do his own thing, and he wants to, create more for that Mendoza name that has already been, etched in history with his older brother. And, I think going to Georgia Tech is a great place to go. And he's got some big shoes to fill following our Lord and Savior Haynes King.
We love us some Haynes King, so he does have big shoes to fill. Another news this week is that we shouldn't expect the College Football Playoff Management Committee to reach any sort of agreement by the January 23rd deadline on potential playoff expansion. There was a meeting between the SEC and Big Ten earlier this week, who control the playoff format, and it ended without any sort of resolution. Rumors coming from it are that the SEC wants to expand to 16 teams, where the Big Ten wants to go to 24, and neither teams will agree to either one's compromise. Apparently, the Big 12 will agree to a 16 team right away if in 3 years we go to a 24. So it's interesting to see, and the rumored formats that I've seen for both, quite frankly, suck. The 16 team playoff would still feature byes, which makes no sense. Just have 2 sides of 8. And then the 24 team one would not include every conference champion. In my opinion, if you go to 24 teams, you have to include every conference champion. There's no excuse at that point. I don't care if it's Toledo. I don't care if it's Akron. 24 teams, every other sport does it. They deserve a chance. It helps grow the sport, helps get them money. They deserve a chance to compete. However, the format the Big Ten wants is 4 reserve slots for every power conference team, and 1 for the group of 5, the rest at large. That would suck. I don't need to see the 7th best SEC team compete for the title.
Yeah, with the 24 one, I think we would see a lot of, your typical overrating of the SEC, like with teams like a Tennessee and Missouri where, it's like, how the hell are they ranked? But they're ranked, and, they were ranked above teams like ours for quite a while, and it was just like, this doesn't really make any sense. And they would find a way to sneak in, and I think that would be terrible for the sport. But it's weird that we're getting so this back and forth with the format when the one we're using is only 2 years old.
They changed it already once.
Yeah, I know. So it's like it's the terminology and the details of it have changed, but like the format of like the 12
team,
we're only in year. We're only in year 2, and it's like, nope, we got to get more because, the rumor that I'm seeing with the SEC wanting 16 is not that they want 16 teams or a 16 playoff format. They want 16 auto bids is what I'm saying, is that they want their, 16 teams.
Whatever the number is, they want half in auto bids.
No, I think they just want the whole thing, honestly. It wouldn't surprise me if they just want all 16. They're like, yeah, we're going to do a playoff, but it's just the SEC, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, why didn't we think of that?" I'm with you. I'm with you. I think both formats suck, especially the one with the 16, where it's like there's double buys, where like the 1 and 2 get 2 buys. And I'm like, have we not seen that the buys are like a curse? Like, if I would not want 2 buys, let alone 1 right now.
No,
so it's
not
like,
at all.
I don't know what we're thinking there, but it's going to be a bit before we get any form of agreement on anything. So that's another thing we'll have to sit back and wait and see. But something that just came in as we were about to press record on here was that the Big 12 is going to move their conference championship game to the Friday time slot in 2026, which for us G5 fans is not good, since all the G5 title games are on the Friday slate,
except for the MAC.
MAC's on like their own schedule, which is fantastic. But it's not a good look in the short term and possibly the long term for the G5.
No, the Big 12 is taking the 8 p.m. Friday primetime slot. Really bad for the Sun Belt and American, considering those were in that exact time slot this year and had record-breaking numbers. Really good for the MAC, though, because the Big 12 is moving out of the noon Saturday slot, and that's typically MAC's slot, too. So now they kind of get a slot to themselves. But for the rest of the group of 5, not good news, because Friday's kind of their day. We'll have to see how this kind of shapes up, but luckily, viewership shouldn't actually impact results or playoff formats, but, take that with a grain of salt. It could change.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, it could absolutely change, and maybe that's one of the things they agree on is how to, like, oh, with the certain viewership, we will get into the playoffs, sort of thing. But who knows? Maybe a G5 will move to that noon slot at some point, just to try and space it out. But who knows? But we'll have to wait and see because the off season is upon us, unfortunately. So thank you all for such an amazing college football season. This was fantastic from start to finish. Make sure you follow our social media at Dynasty Dumbies, to keep up with the offseason news and so that you can vote on our first annual Golden Dummies. Yes, that is right. We are doing an award show for this college football season where you, the audience, will get to vote on it and have a say in it. We will do, we have 9 categories at this time, possibly more, possibly less. We will see. We will put out a Google form for you all to vote on. Those votes will be taken into consideration for the winners. The first annual Golden Dummies will be in 2 weeks. We're going to take next week off to get it all compiled, get it all ready, make sure it's the perfect presentation for you all. And then the following week, we will present our first annual Golden Dummies. So keep an eye on our social media to where the link for the ballots will be put out so that you all can have a say in this because it's going to be unprecedented, of course. The first annual Golden Dummies. Fantastic stuff here. Possibly even maybe get a trophy made so that we can send it out to someone. Who knows? We'll see. We'll have to, details are still being discussed, but we'll find out. Make sure you follow our personal Twitter accounts to keep up with all the off-season drama and shenanigans at Hunter_Shaw5 and at CronyTony20. And we will see you all in a couple weeks for the award show.
Thank you all for an incredible season.